All right, welcome YouTube to another Tech Talk. This is our every 2-week Tech Talk, and tonight we are featuring some special guests. We have Billie Ruben, and we also have Nick, who's part of our Makers Mashup team, and we've got Jesse. So tonight we've got Billie Ruben, and she's from Australia, does some really unique stuff with 3D printers, and I've been following her Twitter for some time, and I said to myself, you know what, she would be great to get onto the Tech Talk and kind of go over some of the things that she does. Every 2 weeks when we do this show, we basically give you the ability to ask questions about maker projects you're working on. And it kind of goes with our Maker Discord, where you can get in there and talk to other makers all the time. It's really a cool little space, and it's not just 3D printing. You want to know about electronics or CNC. There's a lot of really smart people in that chat. So check that out. Links for that are down in the description. So tonight, we're going to start with Billie, and we're just going to kind of go around as we usually do, kind of talk about our backgrounds and what we do here with Tech Talk. So, Billie, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how they can find you, like Twitter, and I heard you also have a website.
Oh, not yet, but I should make one soon. Yeah, my name is Billie. I spend most of my time on Reddit and Discord and Twitter. I help run the 3D printing subreddit and the largest 3D printing Discord. So I might drop some links into the chat for those. And then I hang out on Twitter. I'm Billie Ruben Make on Twitter. My background probably is quite crafty. I started my career as a costume maker for a theater company. And I fell in love with 3D printing maybe 3 years ago and just fell head over heels for it, basically. And now it's all I think about. And I think sometimes my poor boyfriend feels second best to it. So yeah, I love 3D printing. I love helping other people learn how to 3D print. I love using the technology for weird and innovative new things, basically. Yeah, I'm known for some fabric printing, some Dungeons and Dragons dice that are shaped like crystals. And lately I've been working on a modification for a 3D printer that allows you to print in felt. Yeah, that's a really quick overview of me.
That's a lot of different things in a short amount of time. So that's very cool. So thank you. Nick, you want to give a little background?
Yeah, so let's see. During the day, I'm a software guy, so right now I do websites. I've done embedded stuff as well. In kind of my free time right now, working with a robotics team, high school kids who essentially have to build a robot in 6 weeks. They go to competitions, so we're kind of, let's see, less than 2 weeks away from kind of the cutoff for the build. And so then first week of March is when the first competition is. So getting there soon. So they're still a little behind, but I think we'll make it up. So that's kind of what I do on the side. And then, you know, I do 3D printing as well. I've got an Ender 3. I'm building one of the 301s that we've been talking about a bit in the Discord, if you've been in there. So I've got that going, still tweaking that a little bit, and we're still working with Rob to finish that up. So, and then yeah, otherwise just kids, a family, all that.
And you're Mechius in the Discord.
Yeah. Yep.
So Jesse?
I'm Jesse Robinson. During the day, I design circuit boards and write code. And then at home, I have some 3D printers. I have a laser cutter, and I like to do miniature painting and board games and accessories related to board games.
Very cool, very cool. And so I'll introduce myself. As you know, Rob Beck, Maker's Mashup here. My background was very much in a lot of software engineering, software development, and always had a passion for electronics. And then when I finally ran into 3D printing, it was kind of the holy grail. I felt like I was completely freed from any barriers to producing something because for me with 3D printing, I now had the ability to build any enclosure I wanted, to put electronics in it, and really manufacture anything. So that's a bit of my backstory. I used to stream on Twitch, and now I've switched over to YouTube, and we do a making channel here and then a live stream every 2 weeks. So if you're not a subscriber, click that subscribe button and you can see all the videos and when we go live and do these tech talks every 2 weeks. So we did invite Billie here, so I do want to definitely give her the floor here to kind of talk in some of her show and tell. If anybody has questions for Billie or any of the maker projects you might be working on, let us know in the chat. But otherwise, we'll kind of go through our regular process of the show here, which is a little bit of show and tell. And then we also talk about some of the things that we see in the channel Discord. So Billie, you want to show us? I saw that jewelry. That was the most impressive thing. So if you could share that and how you do that, I think everybody would really, really enjoy that.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a little example here. Is the camera getting that? Woo, it's the best. So this is a necklace that is 3D printed onto tulle. Tulle's a kind of very, very lightweight fabric that they use for wedding veils and such. So you can kind of just see it, maybe, if your screen's big enough.
Yep.
So yeah, basically what you do to do something like this is you 3D print the first few layers, and then you pause the print, lay down a bit of fabric and stick it down with some tape or some little clips, and then continue the print. And basically what happens is the fabric is sandwiched between the layers of the print, and it just sort of forms this very strong bond between the fabric and the print. So the back also looks like a print because it's it's sandwiched. And it's quite cool because you can, once you start doing that, you can kind of control the way a fabric moves. So say you wanted something to only roll in one direction or even roll in a really strange, awkward direction, you could do that by printing certain shapes on the surface. So yeah, that's fabric printing in a nutshell. I have a little article for it on Let's Print 3D. So if you want to do it yourself, I've put some pretty robust instructions together there, with little animated GIFs and stuff as well.
I have to say that is pretty impressive, and it was very interesting because I had heard about doing that where you print on tulle. As a matter of fact, Jesse, you were the one that mentioned to me that somebody was making chainmail or something along those lines with tooling, and that was the first time I heard about it, but I'd never seen it. And then I ran across your Twitter, and I was like, wow, that is very impressive.
Well, yeah, David Shorey, who is also on Twitter, I believe he came up with the technique. So if you're not following him, definitely follow him because he does all sorts of amazing things with fabric printing and with all sorts of chainmail-y type stuff as well. He's very innovative. Yeah, David Shorey is one to follow definitely if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's very cool. Jesse, you recently made some chainmail, right?
Yeah, I saw a video by Ben Eady. He was on one of Adam Sandwich's video, and it's a laser cut chainmail. And basically, yeah, you laser cut the form and you weave it together. Like these are the individual links, and you end up weaving it together. And this is kind of what it looks like when it's done. So this was just a little sample, like a little bracer. I'm not sure how you do like more advanced forms because I'm not like a person that does patterns and stuff really well, but that's something I'm interested in trying out. Anything that makes kind of cosplay stuff easier to do. I'm kind of
Now,
interested in it.
that's made out of foam.
Yeah, this is 2mm EVA craft foam. He in his video, he paints like a tacky glue on his, so it gives it a nice strength to it. Mine, I tried to spray paint Plastidip, but it didn't really give much strength to it. It's still pretty weak, but it's just my first test at it. I figure I had a laser, so I wanted to see what I could do.
Yep. That's definitely still on my want list. Very, very envious you have a laser at the house. That is so cool. That's very cool. So, Nick, someone had a question in here. Do you know some person from Texas? So you might want to. I guess she teaches and competes in robotics too.
Oh, okay.
Devin Rizzo.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think. We've seen teams from like California and stuff here and there, and then places like Missouri and things like that that'll come up here and do the regionals. But I haven't personally been to any sort of national competitions, so I haven't met people from too far away.
Yep. Very cool. So what project do you have currently going on, Nick?
Me, mostly the printer, so the 301. So I'm just kind of, once I get mine tuned in, and then working with you on the kind of the iterations and figuring out where to go from there. So I gotta get all my electronics sorted and things like that. So that's kind of my big project at the moment. And then I'm going to be doing some stuff with my kids. My daughter wants to learn how to do like use the printer, and maybe I might teach her to do a little bit of modeling or something too. We'll see. And then my son, I'm going to try and do some programming with him as well. So he does Lego robotics right now. So I also help with that. That's kind of like a once a week thing, so it's not quite as intense. But the club I work with right now is part of 4-H, and so they've got a competition in the like winter spring time, and so we're kind of working up towards that now. So Lego stuff, it's kind of visual programming, but they get to build a little robot out of Legos, so it's pretty cool. So they get a kick out of that. So he likes that. So
is that the Mindstorms?
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
Yep. And so they're kind of on like the third iteration. Like I remember when I went to college in the first year, they kind of have this general engineering class, and they give you this kit, and it was kind of the first version of the Lego stuff, and I can't remember what it was called now, but that was like oh shoot. Anyways, then they had like a second iteration, and now they're kind of on the third one, and this one seems to be kind of like they might be coming up with a fourth one now too. They've got some newer parts as well, so it's definitely a neat little thing, but it's good for like kids. They can kind of introduce them to the concepts of programming.
Yeah, it's kind of got a sort of Scratch-like interface, doesn't it, with the code blocks and.
Yeah. Yep. And there's
And
people that have made like Python. You can program them in Python now. So when someone's got that, they've got more of an actual Scratch-based language that you can do it. But yeah, for the competitions, they kind of force you to use the Lego stuff, but it's fine.
Cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. I can't believe how kids nowadays are so much more exposed to technology. I mean, when you think of STEM, I can't believe what it has really done to just raise technology and make it cool and things that kids are interested in. I mean, back when I was a kid, I was into that stuff, and it was like, you were shunned and you were the nerd, and
you're just kind of like, no one else
you were the outcast. Now it's like the cool thing to do, right? So yeah, it's very cool. And Stephen and Michael in the chat, yeah, I would definitely be interested in having her on the show. So yeah, if somebody wants to drop that in our Discord, I can go ahead and check that name out on Twitter. So very good. Yeah, no, that's super cool. It's neat how kids have all this really cool tech now that they didn't before. So I'll give one of my show and tells. So this is from this week. Just put together this video. We released it today. Neopixels for the SKR. So it was a little bit of an interesting project because the way I had read all the documentation, there wasn't really any needed parts to put the Neopixels on the motherboard. Basically plug it in and you're ready to go. Well, it ended up, I ended up with noise on the line, on the data line on here, and then reading on Adafruit's website, best practices include a 330 ohm resistor on the data line, and then also a capacitor over the power to even out any ripples. So it's kind of an interesting video. That's what I did this week, was put that video together, and you can watch that and see how to add those Neopixels to a 3D printer, which I have to say, it's kind of cool. I mean, it lights up, and as your printer warms up, it starts from blue and goes to dark red. So it's kind of neat how it watches it warm up. So let's see. I've done a show tell. So back to Billie. What else have you been working on project-wise? I know you have a whole box of goodies over there. We heard you shuffling through it when you were looking for things. No, it's all good.
Jesse, your laser cut thing actually reminded me of an older project I did, which was inspired by knitting, which is this, which I wanted to make kind of like sequins and like kind of like this interesting texture. I was experimenting with fabrics. I have a few, so I might run through a couple of them. But the back of it probably looks quite familiar because it's made up of that loop shape, that sort of not quite it's sort of like a wave function, I suppose. So it imitates basically knitting, and I wanted to make sort of a sequin fabric, and it's kind of cool. It's flexible in that direction, so that was kind of fun. And I don't know, this is another one which uses this just rigid PLA, silk PLA. That's why it's shiny. Yeah, and it stretches because of that nice little wiggly shape it has. I think my camera is focusing okay. Yeah. Which is quite fun. I quite like that. I want to print a similar sort of shape onto some fabric and turn it into something because it kind of glints really nicely in the light. I just thought that was really pretty.
So what 3D printer filament did you use with that? That looks like an atomic or something like that.
This is a silk PLA from Monocure. They have a whole range of silk PLAs. I actually helped them review the PLAs before they started selling them. This is called silk, this shininess. But theirs are like the best I've found. I used to buy Polyalchemy, which is like really expensive silk PLA, but this is actually shinier. The colors are richer, and it's way cheaper. So I was pretty happy, to find that. So yeah, silk PLA. It looks stunning. It's one of my favorite materials.
I've got a gold silk PLA here, but it's very temperamental to print with. So it looks good if you're doing like a vase or something like that. But anytime you want to really get into a detailed model, it seems to kind of be hit and miss for me. I sure it's just a matter of tuning that filament better, but just always seem to be a poor enough performer. I just printed something else. I don't have any patience.
They are a bit finicky. I think because the shininess, it shows up any tiny minor imperfection that normally you wouldn't be able to see. And I think like Z seams and stuff can look quite different in the silk than in normal. So yeah, I would agree. It is a bit of a finicky filament, but these ones are the best ones I've found to print. So I'm pretty happy. What else?
And what do you use both of those for? So just experiment?
Yeah, I was just experimenting. I was thinking maybe a big skirt would be really cool because the way it kind of the flexibility it has is kind of dependent on weight. So I sort of imagined if it was on a skirt, it would do this big like vroom 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 kind of thing as I like moved around, which I thought would be pretty cool. But also I thought it would kind of catch on everything. So I don't know how often I'd be able to wear it, but it would be cool for a little while. So I don't know. I do lots of little experiment things. I really like coming up with new techniques, and then often I like don't turn them into too much. Just like, oh, that was neat. Next thing, because I don't know. I have ADHD, so I'm just a bit like all over the place all the time. But yeah, that's a little bit of fabric. I got some other ones. I don't know. How much do you want me to ramble through before we?
No. I mean, I know. Jesse, you've got some stuff too. You brought so. The idea today was kind of focus around some of the clothing and fabrics and cosplay stuff. And Jesse, I know you've done some really, really cool stuff too with that. Do you want to show off that egg you made? That thing is amazing.
Got to get that cat out of the way.
Sometimes I can't believe things are so relatively easy to make, but so impressive looking. Hang on, let me get you zoomed up there.
Right. So this was based on a design from Bill from Punished Props. He released it sometime around near the end of Game of Thrones. I, of course, didn't hand cut it. I did it on a laser and then put it together, and then I airbrushed it with I don't remember the name of the brand. It was basically a craft paint, a color shift craft paint. And then this bottom part was all just, I took a Dremel to get that texture and some quick seal. So yeah, and it's actually it's very light, but it's pretty strong. So yeah, this is my second laser project I ever did, or sorry, second foam project I've ever did. And my first one was this helmet, which was also based on Bill's build design, and not very good, so I never finished it. And then my Captain America shield back here that I still got to paint. I had some problems with the original paint job. I had some Rust-Oleum Bright Coat, and it interacts with everything you spray over the top of it. So I couldn't clear coat it. I couldn't spray my red, and I ended up scrapping an entire shield. And this was the old shield. So this is shield number 2. And it's for my wife's dad. So just need to finish it up. And it was for Father's Day last year, but hasn't come together quite yet. So.
And to just make it all the cooler once it is all wrapped up.
Yeah, and he knows about it now. I showed him, but I gotta cover it in Mod Podge so that I can actually paint it. And then I don't know what I'm gonna do about that silver. It was a nightmare. I might just airbrush the whole thing. So
the shield.
Yeah.
Rattle
can spray paints are always just hit or miss with what they're gonna interact with and what they have in them, and it's kind of a pain.
Yeah, and I wish I was better at that. I mean, painting is not my forte. Every time I do it, it seems like it's terribly painful and it takes a long time. And it comes out okay, but, I always just feel like it's never good enough. So you're your own worst critic, right? So
yeah, and I would say we live in a bad area of the country for that, in the Midwest,
Really? What?
Oh, yeah, humidity and cold.
Okay,
not work
sure.
Well.
Sure.
There's very limited outdoor rattle can spray painting you can do. Otherwise, you can get like frosted and alligatorine, and it's like nothing in winter. I still do. I go out in the garage and I paint, and then I bring it inside real quick. But I try to avoid. I'm gonna make a spray booth, I think, just so I can get that shield done.
Yeah, that would be kind of a cool project to do. It'd be a spray booth that was an indoor one that obviously vented out via a tube, but to build something that was good enough that it would suck the fumes in and not really let it get out of the booth. That might be a good project to do one day.
Well, I have because I have a laser, I have a direct vent to the outside world on a really powerful fan. So I would probably just run it right off of that. I would put it near the laser somewhere. So.
All right. So Nick, any other projects you're working on currently, or anything you got on your show and tell list?
No, nothing really. I was trying to fix a camera earlier this week, and that did not go well. So that was kind of a
this
DSLR,
is actually
but
cool.
it has a telescoping lens. So when you turn it on, the lens is supposed to come out, and it's got like the twist thing in there. So there's a motor in there that turns it out. Well, you turn it on and it wouldn't move, so couldn't figure it out. They're trying to like bang on it, it wasn't doing anything. So I took it all apart, and the only way to get to the lens was to desolder a bunch of pads between 2 different PCBs. So they had the PCBs kind of touching like this, and there was pads on this one and then pads over here, and they had just solder bridged like 10 pads together, and this is how they like manufactured this camera. And I'm like, really? And so but the only way to get to like the lens assembly was to desolder all those bridges and then take it off. So I had to do that, get it all apart, and I went and looked in there, and it seems like what it is the opto what do you call it, encoder.
Yeah,
the encoder is not like picking up anything. So I'm guessing it's either the LEDs or whatever that are in their shot, or there's something wrong with the cabling or whatever. But given it's all kind of a custom motor and everything, I could probably find it if I looked, but the camera's not worth enough to worry about it. So it's kind of a scrapped thing, but I kind of got it all apart. Everything looked otherwise like it was working fine. It was just because it can't sense that it's actually moved out, it kind of just turns itself off to save itself from breaking the camera essentially and tearing up the gears. So yeah, so it was a bit of an adventure. It took me probably 4 hours because I got it, I had to get it desoldered, but then getting it all soldered back together was fun. Trying to create those solder bridges with my, mediocre soldering skills.
Sounds crazy.
yeah. And that's the thing, like you think like of all the mechanical, the stuff that you're going to have to fix, it's going to be this mechanical piece of the lens. You thought they'd make it a little easier to get to, but yeah, it took a lot of work to just get there. And like, I was looking at all the guides. I was like, there's got to be a guy who figured out how to do this without desoldering these. And yeah, every single thing was like, yep, you got to desolder these pads. And I was like, yeah, all right. So I figured if anything, I went into it. It's like, if I can save the camera, great. If not, I wasn't that worried about it. So it didn't, it was kind of if I mess it up, I'm not that worried. But yeah, getting it soldered back together was a treat.
That is pretty crazy that it was manufactured where soldering was the way to go.
And that had to be like part of the assembly line almost, because you can't assemble the camera without soldering those halfway through the process. So it's like, as it was being built, or whatever, like that must just happen along the line somewhere. It didn't look like it was done with a machine. It looked like those were done by hand, like the original ones.
Maybe it had some kind of little jig thing where it's like that. And
they just dump solder in there.
I would definitely think that
3D printed a holder to.
Yeah, that's what I was like. Why didn't they just have a hole with pins? Like that would have made everything so much easier. But yeah, they the way it was designed, it was kind of funky. But yeah, it would create a fun little project.
3D printing's the answer to everything, right?
Yeah, right.
Hey, I don't have a knife and a fork. Oh, I'll just 3D print one. Oh, I don't have this. I'll just 3D print one.
Don't put them in the dishwasher, though.
What's that?
True.
I said, don't put them in the dishwasher.
Oh, man. Yeah, PLA melts something fierce real quick.
Yeah, I bet.
In a warm car.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in Queensland, which is subtropical, so it's really warm here in summer. And yeah, I've had things just melt just in my room, just like the normal room, just like, man. I'm like, oh.
It just inside your house, it just melts?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
So I had my printers all in the front room that gets quite a bit of sun. And yeah, I had like some PLA, my original dice actually. I made these crystal shaped Dungeons and Dragons dice that are like stick dice. They're like long. And yeah, they were sitting in the sunroom up kind of against something, and it must have warmed up and they just like slumped. And I
just imagine walking in the door and all these like different busts and other 3D prints are all like melted, like it's been some sort of tragic fire in the
Salvador Dali painting.
Like,
yeah.
Oh,
yeah, right.
Yes, it was much like
a whole village of plastic people. So yeah.
And it was the worst. Like a melted bust can be kind of cool, but like a melted dice, you can't use it anymore.
No, definitely not. Yeah,
not a dice anymore.
Look at this! I get 6 every time.
yeah, 20
if it
every
rolls.
time.
Yeah,
that'd be great. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So let's talk about a couple things we saw in the chat this week, because it's always interesting to see some of the troubles that other people have. Of course, we always try to help them. Jesse, we were talking about this earlier about the Ender 3 connector, and I thought this was actually something we should talk about because it's pretty serious. You could really end up with a house fire.
Yeah, they are terrible. Apparently the new ones don't have the same kind of connector, but for a long time they had that issue, and they were only changed last year sometime. But I have a whole list actually on Discord of all the posts on Reddit where they've started to catch fire because people recommend enders all the time, and I've known people who were like electroshocked by them, just by the nozzle and stuff. So
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, we had somebody in the chat this week and they were trying to repair it, and it had broken off and they were trying to repair it. And Jesse, you were telling them, hey, we got to get a new connector. I would not repair a connector like that.
I think it was soldered on. So, I mean, as long as he gets a good solder joint, but it's
that's
like
what you have to do.
The pin came off, and then after he put it back together, he had like a power panic failure that he got, and that that tells you right there you're having a connection issue.
Yeah.
He said he turned it off, but I would have hoped that he checked the connector really well too. Like if the source of the problem was the connector, turning off the error doesn't fix it. And yeah, when you have a lot of current going into like an inductive source, like all the heaters, if you start to break that connection, the current doesn't want to stop, so it creates arcing voltages, and that can melt connectors and creates fires.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. And it's so, we take 3D printers like they're just some regular tool, like you'd, buy a toaster or something else. But, all things considered, 3D printers as machines as a whole are pretty primitive without a lot of safety features as a whole. I mean, there's really no safety features to them, short of thermal runaway. And even that, it can, really be a little sketchy. Even if the firmware catches it, it doesn't mean there's not a short somewhere else that caused it in the first place.
And Creality actually disable the thermal runaway protection by default in all their printers, which like compounds this issue. And it's because their sensors aren't very accurate, so it sometimes triggers falsely. But yeah, they have no thermal runaway protection. If you haven't flashed, if you haven't flashed your thermal, like if you haven't flashed your firmware on your Creality machine, you do not have thermal runaway protection, and so your computer will not recognize when the heater is heating up in an unexpected way. And that can cause a fire. So go on Marlin and flash your firmware. And if you don't know how, jump in the Discord. I'm sure it'll be able to help you. And the main Discord has some, the one that I help mod has some of the Marlin contributors.
4 or 5 videos out there that show you how to do it. And TH3D's got good firmware. Theirs is, and they've got a real easy video on how to put those together. So, if totally agree, you got to flash the firmware because gosh, it's just so dangerous. And what limited protection we have, it's still a pretty dangerous device to leave on everywhere. But it's really interesting. I knew the Crealities didn't have the thermal runaway enabled, but what I didn't know is that it was due to the sensors that they were using on there for their thermistors. So that part I didn't know. So that's very interesting to learn that.
Yeah,
and
or at least that's
never
the
had
theory.
problems.
I mean,
I've got one, and I've never had the issue. I know Rob's got one too, and his hasn't had this problem. So I mean, the problem is it's hit or miss. So you get a bunch of people saying, "Oh, this thing's great. You should buy one," and then there's a batch of them that have a bad connector, and I think it's the connector because they are soldered connectors. So it's like, well, unless they really messed up the soldering, that should be fine. I think it's the actual connections are really loose because they use the knockoff. So there's just a whole lot of variance in how the tolerances in those things. So it is dangerous and it is random. So like, I was telling them before we got on the show, is like, I kept an eye on mine for a week or two because I knew about this problem that people were having. And I was like, well, if it ever is a problem, I'll just replace the connector, but I haven't had an issue with mine. So like I said, I never left the thing on overnight for quite a while until I knew that thing was going to be solid.
And you know what really makes me like so irritated about the whole issue with that connector in the first place? I don't even know why it's there. I mean, realistically, you could ship a slightly longer wire and still flat pack that printer and have it just on there all the time. Why is there a connector involved?
I think and it could be a quick disconnect for like if you need to repair stuff. I mean, maybe it's a safety thing from that perspective, but I mean, for the most part,
3D
that cable's really short.
Going to do that, I'm not. Short of the power
unplugged.
Going, it's never coming out. I mean,
yeah, and I don't think I've really ever taken mine out unless I was trying to like get to something over there. So
right.
I know they like to change their design slightly, so they like iterate on them quite a lot, and they don't make new versions or anything. They just keep selling it under the same name.
Yeah,
so probably the connections is so that they can change things quite easily. I mean, I'm just posturing. I don't really know. We could ask Naomi maybe. But yeah, it's not just the connectors though. Like there's all sorts of parts of them that fail. I've actually just posted a huge list in the Makers on Tap Discord of posts about Creality machines in particular. They are a bit scary. I have one, but they are a bit scary. So
and it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, and that's it. Because like
price.
I think that's it. Some of them are like so great, and then some of them are so terrible. And it really is a roll of the dice. But I think with the fire stuff, like keep it somewhere where there's a fire alarm and never run it when you're not home. Because
speaking of which, that's going in my closet too. Once I get one of those
the fire
one of those extinguisher bulbs.
on camera.
Oh, those are great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fire extinguishers on camera. I've got to have you.
Good. You're all
They
good.
have those
People in the
fire
audience,
suppression
though.
ones.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
poppers. The
Yep.
they have them for kitchens, and they like pop, and all the foam comes down when they.
Yep.
Yeah, they're really cool.
Fire
I
out.
want to get one of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit
'Cause I
expensive.
figure if I put one of those in that closet back there with all my, I'm gonna put my printers back there. I got to build some shelves. I just moved, so
I got to do
working on my
this.
space.
I got to do this just because we were talking about the Crealities and a fire extinguisher. So that fire extinguisher is right next to my Creality printer. So
Approved. Yeah, that's great.
I'm not sure that's so good for Creality, but
We did get a couple of
The reality.
comments where people are saying they did enable it, and I know Jim from 2 weeks ago said that they've been enabling it, but like Nick, you had said earlier, there's so many old printer stock out there that you just don't know what you're going to get.
yeah.
Yeah, if you ordered off of Amazon, you're probably not getting anything remotely new, and it may even not even be close to the latest, iteration. So they do sell them direct as well if you want to wait, a week or two to get them. So, I mean, if you buy it direct from them, it's probably going to be hopefully one of the newer models, or at least an old one that they've, refurbished or whatever, or flashed the new firmware, what have you. So,
Well, in my
hopefully
opinion,
that's what they send you.
In my opinion, that's one of the most frustrating things about 3D printers is that if you buy what I'll use the term loosely, mainstream 3D printer like an Ender 3, they change the revisions slightly all the time. So
Yeah,
if
she was
I
saying
got a
that,
printer this week or next week, I have no idea if it's going to have the right parts. And I have no idea why they can't just stamp a version number on the box or something, so you have some sort of an idea if you've got a printer that's, very old and needs several safety upgrades, or if you've got the latest one and you don't have to worry about it. So, yeah, that's a very frustrating topic for me of just, constantly changing them and then not having some sort of consistency.
I think to achieve where they are in the market, though, like you just can't.
Yeah.
XT60 license connectors are probably not cheap. So I mean, those printers are crazy cheap, and they brought so many people into the industry. So it's a trade-off for what they've done for hobby printing, bringing it down another level. I don't know.
Well, and it is open source, right? So you can put a new firmware on there. You can swap out all the parts. There's nothing in there that's like super proprietary. They use kind of like these basic knockoff hot ends and things like that. So, I mean, my Ender 3's got a V6 style hot end in it. It's got a BMG extruder. It's got, I think the heat bed's probably the only thing that's normal. It's got an SKR13 in it. So I've got my own version of Marlin in there. So, I mean, I took it as a platform to play with and improve, as opposed to buying something that I was just going to use out of the box. So you've got different types of people, though. For someone who's not going to tinker with it or mess with it, it is a lot scarier to just buy it, and going to be a lot less reliable to just use it. There are a few upgrades that I recommend. A friend of ours bought one, and he knows software and stuff a little bit and things like that. But as far as like when you're telling people like, oh yeah, this thing works great, and it's like, but wait a minute, I forgot that I fixed a bunch of little issues with it. So it's particularly the entire like connection between the extruder and the hot end is horrendous on the default. Those couplers are terrible. The tube's terrible. So that's kind of the one thing. And the extruder itself is kind of like the arm and stuff is cheap and plastic. Yeah. So those are always the upgrades I tell people, like day one, don't even install the original parts. Like just get those fixed, and then check that connector. Make sure it's not getting hot.
Or you could just build your own printer.
Yeah, you could do that. Which
is virtually what you did to that printer.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. Like I took it as it's like, okay, it's pretty cheap. It may or may not work. It worked, and I used it as it was for quite a while, and then I just upgraded piece by piece. So I'm trying to think of the first thing I did. I think the first thing I did was get those new couplers, because within the first week, my Bowden tube was flying out of those cheap couplers it came with. And so I went through the entire set of the ones they sent me, because they send you extra ones. And I was like, oh, great. If it breaks, I can fix it. But, I went through them like instantly.
Yep. So, Billy, why don't you tell us a little bit? You talked a little bit earlier that you manage a subreddit and also moderate a 3D printing community in Discord. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Maybe post some links in the chat for people that aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, sure. So the 3D printing Discord is the largest one. It's just called 3D Printers. And yeah, we have about 8,000 members now. So it's a pretty big server. And I've been there since I think we had around 300 members. So it's grown an incredible lot in the last couple of weeks, couple of years. And yeah, there's just really cool people all the time posting really cool stuff. It's a very wholesome part of the internet. I struggled with Reddit for a while for various issues, which maybe I'll talk about after I talk about Discord. But Discord restored my faith in humanity many times, this little group, because we're just very helpful and understanding. And yeah, I really want to bring people along the journey, and it's just a really wholesome place. So it's very nice. And the Reddit can be a struggle. It can. I started this account that I'm using currently a few years ago, though I'd been on Reddit nearly a decade. And it was the first time it was more obvious that I was a girl, because it's sort of in my username, and I started posting images where, like, my necklace, for example, had my face in it. And I got quite a lot of backlash on the subreddit just for being a girl and showing my face or showing my hands. And people were like, oh, you're just looking for upvotes and rah, rah, rah. And I saw how differently it was treated when it was guys showing their face, because it wasn't even mentioned. But yeah, like, you know, a guy would print some glasses and no one would mention that he's showing his face, but people would say me showing my face is like a girl posing topless, basically. And I'm like, this is really unfair. And yeah, so it was—
That is unfair. That's really unfair. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really eye-opening, actually. And I went through quite a bit of emotional turmoil because of it, and frustration and all sorts of other things. And I kind of didn't get it before. I kind of didn't get the whole, I suppose, the feminist movement. I didn't understand it before I experienced it firsthand, which was kind of sad. But anyway, yeah, Reddit opened my eyes when it was more obvious that I was a girl, and how differently I was treated when people thought I was a guy and when they thought I was a girl. And yeah, so when the moderator position came up on the subreddit and they offered it to me, I took it because I wanted to make it a kinder place. You know, I wanted to make it more accepting and more diverse, because I honestly truly believe that diversity in any group is a strength, because it leads to more innovative ideas and more creative ideas. If you have a homogenous group, you're all kind of on the same page generally, and it's much harder to make those leaps in innovation. And I truly believe diversity is a strength. And I guess I just wanted fewer people to have the experience I had, across the board, not just gender, just, you know, in general, just make it a more welcome, loving place. So yeah, I did. And I usually just kind of remind people to remember the human and just be excellent to each other. Like, if someone does something that's not cool, I'm just like, hey, this comment's been removed. Remember the human, be excellent to each other, kind of thing. And that tends to get really good feedback from the community, which is really nice. The community has kind of embraced that, and it is moving in the right direction, I believe, which is really nice to see, because it's the largest 3D printing community after Thingiverse, if you count Thingiverse. I think only the marketing team of Thingiverse counts Thingiverse as a community, but the Reddit is the largest one after that, if you count.
You mean when it's online, or did I? Is that
I'm like, a comment section does not a community make, but whatever. Like, they can call it a community if they want to.
They have like some very weak forums out there.
Yeah,
I mean,
I suppose
you can navigate that far without it crashing. So
that's true. Words are fine on Thingiverse.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So it's a really large community for 400,000 people. Yeah, and it's moving in the right direction. While I've been there, I started the wiki page up, which is really cool, and has like loads of information on getting started and troubleshooting and all sorts of other stuff like that, making models. And the posters that I've been making started as a reaction to a lot of really common questions we get on Reddit and Discord. Like, leveling was the first one. So many people, it's like the first hurdle anyone has to get over, right? Yeah, we're all nodding. It's like the first thing you have to learn, and without it, nothing works. It's literally the foundation of 3D printing. So the first one was born out of that, and the other ones are just other needs. Questions that come up a lot that I thought I could answer.
And I know that you've posted on Twitter a couple of really cool guides. As a matter of fact, the one I saw, and it was interesting because, I've been doing this a while now, so I figure I know a lot. But it was really interesting because the one that you had posted was related to a 3D printer, like to the way to print overhangs and the way to print certain things, methods to basically for modeling to improve the way that the print comes out, which I thought was like cool because there was at least 3 or 4 in there. I said to myself, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that, but that's a really good idea.
Yeah, well, I guess I'd never seen like a one-stop shop for all the little things when you're designing a model related directly to 3D printing. Like there's designing a model in general, loads of videos on that, but there's so many little niche things that just are because of the technology itself. And I thought I'd just put them all in one place and hopefully make it a bit easier for people. But a few people have said that, like that poster, lots of people said amazing things about that on Twitter. I was very, very chuffed. Like Maker's Muse and Job Telling and all sorts of people were like, yeah, like Adafruit retweeted it. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it was really neat. And if you haven't checked it out, check out her Twitter. And it's very cool. It shows you like if you're, I remember the one which I knew this, but I never really think of it when I'm making a model because, well, it's just easier to make a regular like half moon where you had said in your document, you're like, if you build it like a teardrop, and I'm like, okay, I do know that it's easier to print that, but I never think about that when, making a model for something. I always just, punch a hole through or whatnot. So it's a very handy guide for just a quick reference of how to solve common problems and making a model that prints well. And that's always a challenge.
Yeah, I really hate wasting plastic. So, sorry, Jesse, you go.
I was gonna say I have to track that down at work. The designers don't think of FDM when they're doing their design. They're constantly, saying like, oh, giving comments like that. So
I can't have this ball hanging out in space all by itself.
Every time. Yeah, a few people said that they have print services, so they print other people's models, and they said that they now send that to their clients so that their clients can design better to make it more printable, which I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that market. So there you go. They're actually they're all available full res online, so you can print them out yourself if you want to, but I have also just launched them on Redbubble, which is like an on-demand print service. So if you want to give me a tiny bit of money as well and you want to print it anyway, you may as well buy it on Redbubble because then we both benefit.
Put a link in the chat. Seriously.
Okay, I'll do it.
Link in the chat. Yeah.
I'll do it now.
I'll try to put it into the if you send it to me after the show, I'll put it in the description as well, so that way anybody that watches the video on demand can get that link as well, because that's really cool. I thought they were pretty brilliant. I'm like, why hasn't somebody done this sooner? And apparently
that's what everyone says. Yeah, they're all like, why didn't someone do this? And I'm like, I don't know, but I am. So
they remind me of, and Nick, you and Jesse, you probably both relate to this, but ever see like one of those posters where it's like common commands in programming or HTML color codes, and it very much the same type of feel to it, just 3D printer related. So yeah, it was super, super cool. So check that guide out if you have not checked it out. I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah, you just start a website where I like hold them all or something, because
I told you you're welcome to post them on Maker's Mashup and just post them up there. You're all set.
Well, I'll definitely link to it or something. I need to get it all sorted. Probably before I come to America. I'm coming to Murph. So we'll all see you there.
Yeah, cool. I was gonna go too.
Yeah, so we are both all three of us are all I don't know what, like 5 hours away from Murph, maybe 6.
Yeah, we're not that far.
Yeah, so we're
we have to drive around a giant lake. If that lake wasn't there, it'd be like 3 hours.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I've never even been to America, and everyone says that Murph is like just the most special place. So I'm like,
it's crazy. Pumped. It's a big nerd party. It's awesome. I like to give an example. Like they have like a late night like taco like dinner that was sponsored by Google, and I think we were in there talking, and it was like midnight when we went back to the main exhibition hall, and it was still had like 80% of the people were still there just talking, like at midnight, just all 3D printing, and it was great.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Like, out of my brain excited.
That's some commitment right there, where she goes across an entire ocean to hang out with a bunch of nerds and 3D printers. That is commitment. That's what that is.
It's because I'm one of you. I'm the biggest freaking nerd.
That is commitment. Holy cow.
The reason I bought my first 3D printer was to play Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I wanted to print those crystal dice and minis. That was the reason I bought, which I think is why a lot of people buy printers. But yeah.
So you bought it for that purpose. Have you used it for that purpose, or did you just get tied up doing all that? I
didn't even fully finish the crystal dice because I was going to just print the blanks and then cast them in resin so they look like real crystals. I wanted them to look like amethysts and the other one, rose quartz, and have not even finished that project, but have done so many other things.
Forget the D&D stuff. I want to start printing stuff.
I did a really cool. I made a dice lamp, like nightlight for my my wife for Christmas, and we made a second one, and it's one of those big translucent dice, and I made a piece with like RGB lights in there, and
yeah,
you can find it.
That's so cool. That's what I wanted to do with this one too. I wanted it to end up looking like a crystal cluster, and then you just like pull the dice out of random bits. But yeah, obviously never happened because I printed everything else.
That is funny, and I had a feeling that was going to be the case because, yeah, 3D printing is quite the hobby. It is definitely got its own addiction. Want to tell everyone too, next week I will be at the Elkhorn Maker Fair. So for anybody that wants to come out and see the prototype printers or anything like that, we will be at the Elkhorn, Wisconsin Maker Fair. So definitely check that out if you are in the area. All right. So what else did you have to show on Show and Tell there, Billy? And then Jesse, I think you've got some other things you were going to show off today.
Cool. Yeah, I was just thinking cosplay. I actually made a mask not that long ago. It's just up there. I'll grab it. Yeah.
And I think you had a couple other things too, Jesse, right?
I think I showed most of them, but I can go dig out that dice lamp.
Yeah. All right, so Billy's got some cosplay here. Hang on, let's get you front and center.
So this is from one of my all-time favorite video games, which is BioShock, which is kind of a horror, underwater, Atlantean horror set in like Art Deco era. Yeah. And it's kind of about capitalism, I suppose. It's got a lot going on.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful game. It's often used to convince people that video games are an art form because it's just so stunning. But yeah, this is a mask from the game. Normally they're a bit more bloodied up, but mine is quite pretty. It's pre-decline. But yeah, on here, this was 3D printed. So you can see I did it in two parts. There's the ears and the base, and you can see a sort of seam running through the back. And then I actually papier-mâchéed over the top of it to give it a bit of texture, which you might be able to see. It might be a little bit tricky, but it kind of has like a sort of decoupage-y kind of texture from that papier-mâché, and it's got little like minor cracks and stuff through it. And then put gesso over the top, which is kind of like a textured acrylic, which kind of looks chalky, and then gold leaf over the top of that, which makes it super duper shiny, which is really fun. I really like putting gold leaf on 3D prints because it can just look so good, and it's really, really easy to do. So yeah, that was a little cosplay one I did. I really like cosplay. Like I said, I started in costume making, and I really like wacky costumes. Corsets are one of my favorite things, but yeah, BioShock.
That is pretty cool. Have you made other?
Murph.
Pardon?
Wear it around Murph.
Oh gosh, I get some like hooks and stuff and run around, torn up dress. That'd be pretty cool. I actually really wanted to do like a little sister cosplay ages ago. And I even have like the petrol gun, or what do you call it? Gas pump gun thing to like make the atom syringe and stuff. But okay. I don't know. Never got around to it. Too many things. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Oh, thanks.
Did is there other cosplay items you've made as well, or?
We had a 1920s themed Christmas party. Not Christmas party, New Year's party this year. Because 2020, welcome in the 20s. And I made a bit of a costume for that. I took apart most of the dress, but I do have some of the jewelry here still. So, this was kind of an overlay on top of the dress, but it had this little brooch that was printed.
Oops. Hang on.
This little brooch that was printed that sort of holds the front of the dress together. And then I had these two little earrings, which are all sort of papyrus themed. The tomb of Tutankhamun was opened up sometime in the 1920s, and it sort of launched the Art Deco movement. Before that, it was Art Nouveau. So this is actually like almost between the two movements because it's got a little bit of each in it. But yeah, this was my sort of headpiece. I had this kind of here and a sort of turban style hat going on. Yeah, so that was fun. There are pictures of that up on Twitter as well. So yeah, that was a bit of jewelry. What else cosplay things? I don't know. I kind of get rid of a lot of stuff because I end up keeping too much. So I don't know. I've made like Jon Snow costumes for exes, and I don't know. There's probably more. I'm bad at thinking on the fly.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
What did you model that mask in?
Oh, the Bioshock mask?
Yeah.
That wasn't my model. That one's actually on Thingiverse. I normally model my own things, but this one actually I took from Thingiverse. So I think someone actually modeled it from scratch. I remember reading it. I'll try and find the link because, yeah, I should credit the artist. It was a while ago now. But yeah, they actually modeled it from scratch, like based on the game itself. So yeah, I didn't model that one.
That is very neat. That is very neat. Did you find your dice there, Jesse?
No, I didn't run upstairs. I'll get it real quick.
All right, cool.
I have other jewelry type things.
Sure.
Going on that.
No,
Yeah.
sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
Tell me when you want me to stop because I have lots of things.
No, it's actually
Okay.
good. So a lot of it's show and tell. People, I don't see a lot of questions in the chat, which is the other reason we do this. So by all means, show and tell. And if someone has a question, we'll pipe up.
Okay, cool. Alrighty. So this is just another example of the fabric printing. You can kind of see you can crunch it up, and these are like little triangles. I thought this might make a really cute pocket. Like I thought that might be a really nice design detail. You can see I sort of experimented with putting gold leaf on them here as well, but probably wouldn't wash very well with gold leaf. I really like Art Nouveau and Art Deco. Maybe that's obvious by the 1920s thing, but I've done a few. There's a jewelry maker called Lalique, and long dead now, but he made beautiful, beautiful jewelry in the 1920s, 1930s. So I was copying some of his designs, yeah, and just printed those in FDM, not in resin, and they came out pretty all right. I want to make some big, long, sort of opal-looking things to put in some of these. This was another fabric experiment where these are hollow and they've got little beads in them, so I'll shake it near my microphone. I don't know if you can hear that, but it makes kind of a little noise. Could you hear that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it sort of makes a noise, which I thought was quite cute. I don't know, just like a really weird thing that could look kind of interesting on like a shoulder, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of bizarre. And then print in place stuff. One of my mates designed this. It's like based on a bike chain, and it's a little wristband, which is quite cool because you don't need to actually attach these all together. It's all print in place. And I actually printed this out of a filament that reacts to ultraviolet light. So when I step in the sun, it turns bright pink, which is really good for someone as pale and pasty as me, because it reminds me to get out of the sun. And it's surprising, even in the shade, how much UV there is, because it reacts, yeah, even in the shade. So that was kind of I don't know, I thought it's kind of a neat use case for some of the sort of gimmicky filaments that we have. Yeah. And another couple of my first prints were these little cicada earrings that are on a little bit of holographic PVC, which kind of just wink in the light, and nice and long and dangly, which, yeah, was some of my earliest prints and one of my earliest models, I think. I don't know, other things. Oh, this is cool. this is a thin sheet, and it's done by a custom first layer pattern that I created in Illustrator and then converted into G-code. And it allows you to make interesting, neat patterns that kind of catch the light. This is flat. It's like a piece of paper, basically. But yeah, you can put interesting patterns on your first layer using that. I don't know.
That's pretty neat. And so just an experiment, just decided you wanted to, or was there a purpose you were trying to drive at with that?
I originally wanted to make a quite realistic wood grain. I thought that would be quite cool.
That would be quite cool, especially in a brown filament.
Yeah, exactly. Like a wood fill even.
Right.
It would be, yeah. So I originally wanted to do that. And it was really funny because I just learned Python at the time. So I started, I just started learning Python. Didn't learn all of it. So much Python. But yeah, started learning Python and wrote my own little script to convert SVGs, which are vector files, into G-code. Which worked. It was pretty cool. And some of the Cura developers said, oh, we'll help you make this a plugin for Cura and stuff. And I was like, oh, that'd be great. And then uni started back up and I didn't have time to finish it. And then I come back to it months later and someone else has made the exact same thing as a plugin in Cura. So I was like, yay, someone else did it. I didn't have to finish it. So yeah, you can just drag and drop. Well, you can install the plugin and then drag and drop SVG files into Cura and you'll be able to print things like this. And then you can print other files on top of it. So if you just want this on the first layer of something, you can do that and then just do another print on top of it and it'll keep that pattern on the bottom, which is cool, I thought.
So how does it make the pattern? Does it use like different layer heights on the first layer, or how does it generate that kind of like different texture?
Yeah, so it's actually the direction of the, I've got another one here. It's actually the direction of the lines. So on this one, it goes all the way. Sorry, I needed the sound effects apparently. That's the sound of my printer. My housemates describe it as happy little sci-fi sounds, my printer, which yeah, sounds like that. But yeah, it's the direction of the lines. So this is a silk filament again. So it's that silky texture. But yeah, the direction does it. Yeah. And so this is little lines going that way and that way and that way, making up the cube shape. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That is very cool.
Yeah, I thought so too. And you can do things like print multiple different colors on the same layer, which I think Make Anything has a really good tutorial on that. I don't know whether he invented it. I think he might have. But yeah, this is just a few layers thick. So you can print the same. You can print on top of a model without moving it from the build plate. And as long as the other model fits into the first model, then you can make these cool shapes on your first layer, which is fun. And I used a similar technique to make this gradient filament. So this isn't filament you can buy that creates this gradient. I actually made some gradient filament, printed it, and then fed it back through my machine. And I
was gonna say I've seen is it Dasmia?
Dasmia, yeah, she
does
invented
a lot of those, and they look pretty impressive.
Yeah, so her method, you needed to change color on every layer of the first spiral that you print, which is the filament. But I worked out a way where you only have to change colors once, like you just print one print and print another one over the top because it's staggered from the inside to the outside. So you actually don't need to change every single layer. So I'm going to put it, I'm in the process of putting a video together on that because I was trying to explain it to people and I think it needs pictures and videos and stuff to go with because it wasn't making much sense. So yeah, be my first YouTube video, hopefully soon.
Well, that'd be cool. I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah. I feel like I've talked a lot now. Someone else.
It's all good. All right, Jesse, you've got the floor on the dice. This is pretty cool. And it kind of goes with the Neopixel theme we were talking about earlier here.
So it's a just a standard translucent D20, and then I designed a base which is super bright on camera, but it's 5 Neopixels and has an Arduino to drive it, and it has, I think this one has 4 different animation modes controllable from these little switches, and I can control the speed and the brightness and what mode it's in. But this is my favorite mode, and it's got EEPROM, so when your power goes out, it keeps its mode. But these are kind of our night lights that we use all the time. So, and I made one for my wife, and then I made a second one because I was going to do a tutorial about it, and so I had her do it so I could show the soldering and all that other stuff. But we never got much further in it. But I might end up like doing making a custom circuit board with the lights and the stuff on it. And I was looking for a source for the light or the dice, and it's actually there's a bunch of them at a local game store, so I might see if I can sell it through them, or at least get a discount on the dice. So
That's really gorgeous. It's
thank you.
Beautiful. Well done.
Yeah,
Love it.
the Neopixels are neat, and I bought like this. I did this video, and I bought like this gigantic roll of these, and it was just because they didn't really. They either sold like such a tiny roll, it didn't seem worthwhile, or it was a gigantic roll, and I had a bunch extra. But now that I've got them, and I've done that video with the printer. Now I want to start doing more stuff like that, Jesse, with using a controller. Because I've seen like people on Twitter put some really, really cool stuff together with some of the Neopixels. I never had any, so I never messed with it.
Like
but now that I've got a
lights and everything, that's
gigantic roll, I might as well mess around with it some.
RGB everywhere, yeah, indeed.
And I have some base code now that I've kind of used on a bunch of stuff. So that was my first code base. Well, I mean, not first one I've ever done, but that was my first one for that type of application. I used it in a sign that I made for some friends. And then when I made that tree topper, I extended that code base into that. So I can give you the code base. It's a helpful starter. And I've started switching over to dot stars because they're basically SPI. The Neopixel has some very particular timing requirements. The dot star has a clock and data, so it's a little more forgiving.
And I heard,
just the data line on the Neopixels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I heard that that's one of the reasons why there's not more to the Marlin code for the Neopixels. Because one of the things, it's kind of cool that it shows you like when you're warming up and it changes colors. But at the end of the day, I kind of said to myself, well, gosh, that's it. That's really all it does. I mean, you could put custom G code in there, which is great. But I heard that the reason why it doesn't have that is because of those very particular timings that it requires. You wouldn't be able to 3D print and run the Neopixels with any reliability.
Yeah, and especially if they can't use a SPI or something that's hardware based, then they've got to do it. They got to bit bang it, which means you have to use some sort of timer. And I know, what was I running into the other day? I was looking into something. Oh shoot, something with fans and something else. But it was essentially the reason there was an issue. Like people were having the same problem I was having. And it had to do with the fact that the timers and stuff, they have to share timers for different functionality. And so if something can't be done in hardware, they got to use a software timer to do it. And so then, we got to run the timer at like this rate to support this functionality, which is kind of important for printing, so that, okay, we'll just kind of piggyback off that. It's not perfect, but it's, 4 ticks and it's good, every 4 ticks instead of every single one. So they have to kind of, depending on the board, right? So the SKR's got this chip, and then, they got these other chips. So each board has its own little set of like what runs off of what. So it's actually pretty impressive how well they can support all these different boards with having to do that. Like they can kind of share these timers and make it all kind of work.
Yeah.
Well, Marlin's now got that whole hardware abstraction layer too.
Yeah,
so
which is probably where this is baked in.
Yep. So that makes a big difference if you're dealing with hardware abstraction versus coding boards individually. I mean, you still are, but it's at a much lower level than if you were putting code in say the move function and you're planning out each motherboard in there. I mean, that's a big difference. So very cool. So what other projects are you currently working on, Billy? I know that you've talked a little bit about some jewelry and some clothing, and you're coming to Murph, so that's cool. But what other what projects you got in your pipeline right now? I know I've got a new video in the pipeline on the 1.4, but I want to hear what you're currently starting to work on.
Oh, your mic's
Oh, you're
muted.
muted.
I've been so good. We almost got through flawlessly.
That's all right. If there's at least one mic that's on mute, then it's not a
This is
good
my
stream. You know, you can't enjoy it.
This is my first live stream. I don't know whether I said that up front, but
You're doing
forgive
great.
me.
You're doing great. I'm glad we could be your inaugural stream.
Thank you. Yes, it's been very good. Yeah, so for Murph, I want to get a couple of things done. I am being sponsored to go, so Antithesis Labs is paying for my trip, which is freaking amazing. And James, the owner, and I have been friends for a long time, and yeah, he's like, you've got to come to Murph, and slowly over the course of like a year convinced me that he would sponsor me to come. So that's wonderful. And for him, I am writing a manual for his little rep wrap machine, which is this gorgeous little rep wrap that has printed rails that are actually quite neat and work really well. So I'm currently helping him write the manual for that, so that we can, give it a big launch at Murph. And then on a more personal level, I want to hopefully get my felt printer done by then. A little while ago.
Tell everybody a little bit about that, because I had heard about it, but honestly, I except for a couple of tweets that I happened to catch, I haven't heard much about it. So I thought it was really interesting. So I'd love to hear more about that concept.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, currently, most 3D printing materials that we have access to are either rigid and solid, or they are flexible, but it's the kind of rubbery sort of flexible like TPU, or the flexible resins are quite similar. It's not the kind of flexible and comfy, it's where it's like a fabric that you kind of want to cuddle up into at the end of the night, or, have against your body potentially. So yeah, I came up with a method for printing felt using wool. So basically there's this handwork technique called needle felting, where you have these long needles that have little downward facing barbs, and you get wool roving, which is like loose wool. Probably could do a demo, but I don't know. Depends whether we feel we need one. I've got some wool there, but it's like loose wool, like sort of not fresh off a sheep, but that kind of vibe. And you poke it with this needle downwards into it, and it draws some of the threads down and sort of tangles them all together and makes sort of homogeneous felted matted form. And you can create all sorts of shapes in that way. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if somehow we could get a machine to do this for us? So I thought, what if I strap a needle felting needle to a 3D print head and have it go up and down, kind of like a sewing machine, and then feed it wool, like yarn, I think they call it in America, this stuff, and feed it wool, and then maybe it will like felt stuff together, and if you move it around, it will create objects. So this was my very first prototype, and I hand moved it around. It's not attached to a machine yet, but in here goes a little needle, that a needle felting needle, just the normal ones you use for hand working, and it pokes down, and as it goes, it draws out little bits of this wool, and then it mats them together using that needle felting process. And it does seem to work. At least me moving it around as though a 3D printer would does create objects, which I had one right here, but it's gone. Maybe it floated away. Oh, I had one. Anyway, oh, there it is. It's on the floor. So this was my very first go, which is like a little 3D printed heart. And it looks one-dimensional, but there is actually several layers there. So it is actually a three-dimensional form. So worked out that. And also the bed for it, which is basically an upturned brush with all the bristles pointing upwards with a layer of felt on top. Because obviously you can't just put it on a flat bed or it would break the needle, because it needs to actually be going through the fabric, or through the wool. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. I don't know if that makes sense. Ask me questions if it doesn't, because I want to get more explaining. Yeah.
That is very impressive. So is the goal then to be able to make 3D objects out of felt?
Yeah, so like teddy bears, pillows that are custom especially for you, like just the way you sleep, insoles for your shoes, hats, anything that's cuddly, like nice and soft.
So how do the layers actually adhere to each other? Is it just that they're matting each other?
Pretty much. It's called felting. So it's basically like matting. If you think of like a dreadlock, it's it's kind of like that on a smaller scale. But yeah, like felts that you get in a store basically goes through a process of usually needle felting. They jab it with all these needles, and that makes that homogeneous sort of mass. It sort of tangles all the fibers together. So after I pull the prints off the machine, I also add them to some really hot soapy water, and that also opens up all the fibers. And then as the heat dissipates out of them, it kind of joins all the fibers together. So that helps too. It's kind of like shampoo. You know, if you ever shampoo your hair and then it feels kind of like rough, that's all the fibers kind of opening up. Which is what you want. So you open them all up, and then when they close, they kind of draw together and attach to each other, kind of through friction and all sorts of other forces. But
that's super interesting.
It's like a really good application if you've heard of, I don't remember, I guess I don't remember what the term is called, but like soft robotics, like, you know, like kind of toys for kids that are sensory, like you can put electronics inside of it. And if you could, you know, make it look like whatever you want instead of having to like hand do it or find something that's already made, that sounds like a interesting application for that.
That'd be awesome. And I think too, like medical devices and stuff, like I don't know, one of my friends' mums has cancer and has to constantly monitor her heart temperature or her body temperature, because if it rises above a certain temperature, she probably has a fever, which is really, really bad when you're on chemotherapy because your immune system's shot. So we've been working on like a wearable device that she can just constantly monitor her temperature, and it alerts her or sends a text message to like people around her and stuff if it gets above a certain threshold. So yeah, it'd be really good for applications like that too, because you could print a custom thing exactly for that person and it won't bother them too much and all that other stuff as well. So yeah, I don't know, I feel like it just opens the door to a lot, like a whole new world of stuff. So I'm like really excited about it, and I really want to get it done. So
that's a good question. So what are your next steps for, obviously you've been able to kind of prove out the theory. So what are your next steps to actually building a fabric 3D printer, if you will, or felt 3D printer?
Yeah, sure. So one of my housemates is much more tech savvy than I am. I mean, I'm pretty all right, but like he can code really well and all sorts of other stuff, and he's very good at hardware. So we're working on that together, and we're basically going to be mechanically converting the extrusion motion into that stabbing motion. So I'm hopefully actually going to be catting up some stuff this afternoon. And then printing out. I want to make it really printable, and I want to make it so you don't have to flash the firmware. You might just have to play with the extrusion multiplier or something. Because I thought the kinds of people who are familiar with sort of felting and familiar with fabric probably came from a similar space to me and may not necessarily have a super technical background. I know updating firmware and stuff was really intimidating to me when I first started printing. So I'm hoping what this will be is print all the parts, assemble the parts, put them on the machine, and then hit go kind of thing. So that's my hope. But yeah, just making the parts is the next step, really.
Are you looking at like tattoo machines, or even I guess a normal sewing machine for your inspiration for the rotation motion into up and down?
So I did look at tattoo machines, but they don't jab far enough. That was actually initially what I looked at as well.
Which is probably a plus in tattoo machines. So,
yes.
You know.
Yes, don't really want to tattoo your muscles, probably.
Look, it was clean through.
Maybe too. I don't know. People are interesting. But yeah, so it doesn't jab deep enough, unfortunately. And sewing machines have a really complicated mechanism because they have to be quite strong. So I did look at that as well, because sewing machines are, that's where I'm from. Like that is my familiar territory. So I did start there, but it is really complicated. Which I don't think it needs to be for this, because it's actually not a really force intensive motion pushing that needle through, because it's quite fine. And just doing it by hand, you hardly need to put any force behind it. So I'm hoping that we can just we went on the 507movements.com, you know, the mechanical movements. You ever seen that website?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Sounds really cool.
Amazing website. Go check that out, because it just has animations of all different mechanical movements. And it's really, really inspiring. So if you ever
sounds very cool. Yeah, and I gotta check that out. Cool.
I think we're using number 1, 2, 3. And we're going to start with that one and see if that works. And it just, you use a rotation and it puts a lever up and down, basically. So it'd be slow.
Oh yeah, this website's definitely trouble. I can't do this during the stream. I'll just sit here and play on that website. Yeah, That's what. Oh, I didn't know how this worked. Oh, look
Yeah.
at this. Oh, I
It's
can
like
build one of those.
please.
I'll have
I
to
don't
show
know.
this to the robotics team. We need to work
Oh,
on
yeah,
our
yeah.
motion systems.
It would be great for robotics. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
No, it's
And
always
it's
a
cool
struggle.
because they all get numbers, so you can be like, we'll
Mhm.
just use a 238 right there, and
Yeah, figuring out inventive ways to create like pulley systems and gearing for the motors and how to attach or connecting motors to wheels, things like that is always
that
a
is cool stuff.
struggle to position things.
Yeah. It's very inspiring website. So yeah, hopefully I really want to keep it as simple as possible, like super simple. Because I reckon the easier it is to get working, the more people will use it and the more people will find interesting, cool things to do with it, which is what makes me happy. So yeah.
And you should definitely like make like an Ender 3 mod, because those are like the cheapest printers, and if it doesn't catch fire, then you should be all set with converting it to a felt printer. So that would be
Got a bed full of felt in the fire.
Yeah, no fire.
Sounds
Yeah,
like
I'm
great-
like,
sounds great.
maybe not the best combo. Maybe we need to rethink that one.
Fabric is very flammable.
That's
But no, I think I would have to do something like that because I have a really little machine, my first machine that I ever got, that I think I'll do it on first. But I do have a Creality. I have a CR10S5, big beast of a thing, 500 by 500 by 500 build volume.
That's a good size volume.
Yeah, don't get one. Bed slingers, not meant to be that big. Just
Oh my
don't get
God,
one.
it's a bed. Oh
Yeah,
my
they
God.
said
Yeah,
bed
like,
singer. Yeah,
I didn't know.
the CR10 is
I didn't know
pretty
anything at the
bad.
time. Yeah, like I didn't know, but don't get one.
Just print really slow.
Yes.
Really slow.
Really big things, really slowly, just weeks.
Big layer
Really
lengths.
But yeah, I have that one, so I'll use that to make an attachment. And there's some Prussia's Prussia MK3s at the makerspace I go to a lot. We have a free makerspace here in Brisbane, which is really cool.
Nice.
It's called the Edge, or the Fabrication Lab at the Edge. Yeah, it's really cool. I hang out there a lot. I'm doing some workshops for them next week. I'm starting it next week. But yeah, I hang out there casually too. And so I'll probably be able to make some attachments to fit their machines as well. So got the MK3s and the Enders, and that will get a lot of people going, and then hopefully people can design from there.
Yeah, that's very cool.
If you can put one on MK3, Joseph usually comes to Murph. I'm sure he'd love to see that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That'd be cool. Look, my Prusia happens to make fuzzy bunnies, and instead of like a Deadpool bust, it's a fuzzy bunny. And
It's a little teddy bear.
right.
See all the cool applications at Murph. I was there 2 years ago, and someone converted a powder printer into a laser sinter for glitter.
Oh, I've
they
seen
were
glitter.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet.
incredible.
They were trying to just do nylon, but they're like, powder nylon's really expensive. You're like, you know what's not expensive? Like a 5-gallon bucket of glitter. So they were doing everything in glitter, and it was really fragile, but then they would coat it in like an epoxy, and then it would be strong, and they did a skull, and it was really cool looking.
That is the greatest thing. I love glitter so
That is
much.
hilarious. You know what's really cheap? 5 gallons of glitter.
Yeah.
That's the best. I hope they come again. I would love to
so.
see that. Glitter people, if you're in the audience, please come to Murph. I want to hug you.
Glitter people.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
So
awesome.
cool. People are so clever. Like that's what I'm really looking forward to in Murph, just seeing all the amazing things people do. Like, yeah. So keen.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I look at literally the last 10 to 15 years, and it's not even like far back, right? 10 to 15 years, we have just leapfrogged all of this really cool manufacturing technology that is in people's homes. I mean, little like a woodpecker CNC and a 3D printer. My gosh, if I have those two things in the basement here, and with that I can make just about anything. And 15 years ago, plus, further back than that, somebody said 3D printer or something like that, they thought you were on drugs. I mean, it's crazy how this technology, just in a very short amount of time, has really become available to just every end consumer. And you know, we've been giving it kind of a hard time, but an Ender 3, $180 US. I mean, man, that's cheap. I mean, that's almost like, you know, microwave cheap. You know, when you go to the store and you see those pallets of microwaves for like $29. You know, I mean, it's going to be like 3D printers in a few years. I mean, it's really getting that cheap.
Yep. It's amazing. Even in the like 3 years that I've been here, it's changed radically. Like, I think you're right about the Ender 3. Like, as much as, you know, there are criticisms to be made, but it has definitely opened the door for so many people into the world of 3D printing, for sure.
Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, it's, you know, for me and a lot of people in 3D printing, or there's a good group of us that are, you know, we like to tinker with stuff, so it's a platform for that. So its shortcomings don't mind or bother us much. We're like, oh great, you're going to give me all of these pieces and kind of this design that I can work with and build off of, you know, for a pretty low price. And it does, you know, basically work out of the box, but, you know, the build surface is kind of junky and, you know, things like that. So there's like things that you kind of have to deal with out of the box. But you know, you look at like an Ultimaker and the price gap is huge. You know, even the Prusa is like, you know, you look at a Prusa and to me, same basic design, you know, much more well put together, better components out of the box, but it's significantly more expensive. So of all the stuff I've put on my Ender, it's still not anywhere near the cost of a Prusa, and it probably prints darn near as good. So, I mean, I think, I don't even know how much I've spent on mine, anywhere from 150 to 200 maybe, and just extra stuff. I don't even know if it's that much. 150 maybe top end. So, I mean, all in, I'm 350 into my Ender. So still about half the price. So, I mean, I think from that perspective, and then, you know, I can always add to it later. I don't feel as bad about messing with it. If I bought $1,000 or $2,000 Ultimaker, like if I try to like change something on my Ultimaker, I'd be like shaking, you know, every time I change something because I'd be afraid to break it. It's more of a, you know, it's not even an appliance. I mean, that's more expensive than my whole kitchen full of appliances for like one of those things. So
yeah, I mean, it's interesting how that is so expensive, but becomes need based, right? So when you buy an Ender 3, you have a working printer. And we have a friend who recently just got one. And he's got a working printer. Well, he doesn't want to do bed leveling, so he buys a BL Touch. But he's still got the stock bed. He's still got a bunch of other things. I mean, you can, when you put it into perspective, if you want to buy the base Ender and 3D print and get into the hobby, and then you want to add something on, you just add it when you want to add it. It's one of those things where you don't have to, you know, upgrade your whole computer to play the latest game. You can just upgrade this little piece and, you know, maybe print the model that you wanted or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think hardware wise, like it's got workable stuff, but yeah, you can kind of swap things out. And because the firmware is just Marlin, you can, you know, modify it. And all the new features, like just going from what came with the printer, like when I bought it, the firmware it had versus what I have on it now, you know, you got the S-curve acceleration. I can put my SKR board in there with the silent stepper drivers and all this stuff to just, and, you know, it's darn near quiet outside of the fans, which I refuse to replace because it doesn't bother me enough to put silent fans on it. But that's the aspect to me. Like I probably won't ever have a printer that doesn't run Marlin or some other open source firmware because I can't, as a software guy, I have to be able to futz with that stuff. It's just in my nature. I can't let it be to my detriment sometimes. It's like, oh, new feature, I got to try that, even if it doesn't work for like my printer doesn't work for 3 weeks because I messed something up. So because to me, it's just like I'll sit there and mess with it forever. It's like, oh, when I get there, it's going to be amazing. You know, bed leveling. You know, I was messing with that recently for the first time, and
dude, you
have to really mess with it.
Anyone should have ever spent
on
bed. Oh my god.
Well,
okay,
so,
all right. Well, let's be fair. I won't overreact. You explain what you did to your bed, and we'll let Billy and Jesse decide if that was too much work, and we can let the chat decide if that was too much work for a printer bed.
If it makes you happy, it's not too much work.
Oh my god, you gotta hear this story. Including you going out and buying that Mill 6 or whatever
yeah. So
you gotta tell the whole story for your bed leveling. Oh my god.
I had a plan. So when I got my Ender, obviously the bed wasn't super flat, so I got a piece of glass that goes on it. But when you clip the glass down, it bends as well or whatever. So my bed is kind of like it's got this shape going on. A lot of people have like the opposite, which would have been nice because I feel like I'd have less issues, but mine goes the other way. So when I clip the corners, the glass kind of bends a little bit. It's only like a 3 mil glass. So I was reading online and everyone's like, buy this tooling plate essentially. And
which weighed like 20 pounds.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy. It's like 6 millimeters thick and it's just solid aluminum, and it's flat. It's milled flat. It's always flat. It'll never not be flat. It's got, better thermal and stuff like that. So my idea was to take that and slap like an AC heater on it, and I would have had to drill all the holes and stuff. But then I was thinking, well, this thing's super heavy. I'm going to put it on my Ender, and it's going to start like rocking back and forth as this thing's flying around. So I would have had to slow my prints down for one. And so I have this 200 or like 235 millimeter by 235 millimeter piece of metal. It's laying around my house now because I'm not going to use it. So but yeah, that was kind of my idea. And I know people have done that. I think if on something like Core XY or something where the bed goes down, it makes sense. But on anything that's throwing the bed around, it's never going to work. So but yeah, so that was one adventure in dealing with my unlevel bed. But what I ended up doing is just I have this copper tape that I use, and then I can just shim up the sides so that the glass lays flat. So that worked a lot better. That was easier, and the copper tape doesn't weigh that much.
It's actually not the craziest bed that I know of. I have a mate who has a stone bed made out of stone, like a big slab of stone, and it works really, really, really well. It's a great bed. Yeah, so
but how
not the most out there bed.
Heavy? I mean,
it doesn't sling. It's on a Core XY. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Like when you go Core XY, you can get away with a lot more designs and stuff.
You don't have to necessarily go Core XY. You just can't have the bed move around. That's the worst idea ever.
Yeah, you can have a Delta or something or whatever. Yeah.
I will say that's the most frustrating thing is level problems and layer not sticking. Like when I first bought my Prusa, I'm from a different type of printer than you, Rob. To me it's a tool. I want to hit go and have something I designed print, and so I bought that one after having a couple other printers, and it just would not stick. And I fought it for so long, and it was so frustrating. I'm like, I paid all this money for a printer, it's not sticking. Everyone else's is sticking, and in the end, like I found other people that had the problem, and they just put they used a Brillo pad just to give a little texture to the PEI surface, and now it runs like a champ. But like, I don't want to fight that first layer, and I don't want to watch that first layer. So all the steps that people are going through to get level bad, if it makes it repeatable, that that makes sense to me. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. Like, oh, I need to reprint this the 5th time because the first layer didn't take.
Yeah,
go ahead, Billy.
Continue. No, you go. Keep talking over people.
I was only going to say that I noticed that bed leveling, the larger the bed gets, the harder it becomes to bed level. I know like my Ender and even the 201 that I built, they stay pretty level because they've got small around 200 millimeter beds. But when you start getting into that 300 millimeter plus range, the beds no longer stay flat, at least even end to end. So they go like this. And if it wasn't for UBL, there is no way I'd be able to use like this larger format printer on this Core XY. Without having something thick and like stone, as you were pointing out, Billy, something like that to keep it level, because it's just a very imperfect surface when you've got a very thin piece of aluminum and it gets bigger and bigger.
And I've also wondered, like, I thought my printer was bowed in the middle for a long time too, but I don't know if it's actually that or if the rails sag.
That could be too,
because that would make it seem like the middle is raised up. And I've had 2 similar things to this MakerBot knockoff, and both of them, I'm like, how the heck does it bow this way in the center, both directions? It might just be that the rails are, that it's not level.
Yeah,
it might not,
so there's
at all.
Yeah, and there's certain things, like, because I did put a square on my bed, and there is a slight thing in there, but yeah, I've seen a lot of people, like, they'll sit there and try and diagnose it for the longest time and find out, oh yeah, some reason my axis is actually bowed. So I've seen that as well. And I'm concerned that that's what the problem is with the 301 build I have, is that actually X rail may have bowed a bit on me as opposed to the bed bowing, but I'm not sure. So the big thing that people have kind of said is, part of the reason why this happens so much with the printers is because they're doing the 4 corners. And so someone will crank down 2 of them too much, and it creates a, stress on the bed. And so when it heats up, it wants to like bend, and then it kind of remembers that. And it doesn't go back to the way it was. And so that the solution a lot of people is like 3-point leveling is really how they should be doing it, so that it, you're leveling on a plane. You don't have the ability to really, crank the bed, but you could still bow the middle, I guess.
So you can, I think there's a plugin. I'm not a big Octoprint guy. You guys know more than me, but I know there's a plugin that people are using to check how level their bed is. That you could actually check that a little more statistically than paper slide.
Yeah. So what I do is I do have a bed level sensor now that I've been using. So I run that across, and it probes. I think I've got enough 5x5 grid right now. But and then there's a topology report plugin for Octoprint, and it'll show you kind of where the high pieces are and where the low pieces are, and you can Marlon will print out the grid as well for you as well, so you can look at it that way. But yeah, seeing the visual thing is nice. I can see there's like this bow in the middle of my bed. Yeah, essentially. Yep.
Also,
so this.
Oh no, continue.
Go ahead. That was pretty much done.
Okay. So the first poster I made was on bed leveling, and it actually shows you how to do live leveling, which is the easiest way I've found to level. And I wrote this poster after getting my CR10S5, which had the worst leveling ever, and I thought the bed was warped, and it ended up being another issue entirely. But basically what I do to level that, and that has a 50 by 50 centimeter build volume, so it's freaking huge. And I don't have any automatic bed leveling on it, and it was messed up, the leveling originally. So what I do with that one is I slice a great big like flat cube basically, and then set it to concentric infill, and make it almost as big as the bed, and then hit go on that, and then it starts printing the border. And as it's laying down the border, you adjust the screws so that it looks until you get it to perfect. And on the poster there's actual images of too far and too close, so you can kind of have a visual reference. So yeah, that's the way I level that beast of a machine. And yeah, it stayed, after I leveled it that way, it almost always stays level. And I just print everything with a skirt, which you kind of have to do anyway to prime your nozzle. And then you can actually see whether it's not level and adjust it while it's printing the skirt. So that's how I manage bed leveling in the physical way, the non-ABL way, which I actually prefer, because the Anycubic Costal behind me, this Delta, has automatic bed leveling. And I actually really miss being able to just be like, I need to make that slightly, which you can't do on a Delta anyway. But but I really do miss physically just being able to change it as it's starting. So that poster really, like that method is solid. Like it really, really helped me. And if that doesn't work, your bed is definitely warped. Like, for sure.
And that's the issue. Like if you do a warped bed, you're kind of like, well, you can't do anything because out of the box it just assumes your bed is this level. So without some ABL or whatever, you can't account for that really. Definitely. Unless you can really get it flat. I took the bed off my ender and I tried to literally like bend it by hand, and I could not get it to like actually bend. So I mean, maybe if I like heated it up and did it, I might even be able to do it. But yeah, it didn't have much luck trying to do that.
Nah. A lot of the Creality machines come with warped beds. It's really, really common for them. Like to the point where someone's like, I can't level. And I'm like, is it an Ender 3? Because like, yeah.
Is it on fire? Is it an Ender 3?
Yeah, right.
ANET A8 is still like the worst, but we don't get as many of them on the subreddit now.
Yeah, and I think that they kind of fell out of favor. I think ANET gets a bad rep. They were like the acrylic and stuff really didn't hold up well. And then I think the biggest thing to me is on the Ender 3 is those stupid couplers. They keep shipping those same terrible couplers when it's like, just send some decent ones. Like, please, can we pay $10 more to get decent couplers out of the box? So I wish they would just send a better set of couplers that would hold that tube more solid, because that's my biggest beef with the out of the box experience, because they don't hold up much at all. So.
All right, so let me share one of the projects I'm working on, because we've been around a lot of different projects here. So this is going in next week. Actually, I should say this weekend.
Get some sun.
but we'll probably be on the video next week. So, anybody want to guess what this is? That except Jesse and Nick, because I know they both know what this is. Anybody want to guess what this is? For we're going to be installing it next week. AC filter, PSU, MKS. Yes, it is.
It's kind of like an AC filter.
Yeah, it's sort of. But yes,
Or
it
DC,
is
I guess.
the power module. So interesting enough, I had seen this a couple of times, and I'm very interested in it. Now, for me, my approach to power recovery is by a UPS, right? You can still have a same trigger line like this and tell the printer that it needs to shut down. But I figured because a lot of other people had interest in this, I was going to give it a shot and see how it operated. So I'll be working on the video for this weekend. But essentially, this has a very impressive, which I thought was very impressive, a 5 farad capacitor. So each one of these are only 2.7 volts, but they're 5 farads each, which is just a boatload of stored energy. But it creates out of all of these enough 24 volts to, in theory, get your printer to save the print. And my understanding is you should be able to get the nozzle to get off of the print, which is something I would be interested in. So going to be a video in the next video I do and an experiment, but I thought very cool. So I thought I would share that particular project that I'm working on.
I'm muted. That's awesome. That'll be really good.
Yeah, I think it'd be kind of cool because then if the printer does lose power. But what's interesting about this module that I thought was cool. I mean, this is completely agnostic. While they make this for the Big Tree Tech SKR, this thing could be used on any printer realistically. It just literally sends a signal to 2 pins, so you could use it on an Ender. And the other thing I thought of too, as it started to get silly, there's really no reason why I couldn't put 4 or 5 of these in a printer. I mean, there really would be no reason why I couldn't. I don't know how much more power that would store, but it would certainly have the ability to do that. No. All right. So we've got about 20 minutes left here. So want to see if there's anybody in the chat that has any questions for Billy or Nick or Jesse or myself. Anything that you guys are wondering. And then while we're waiting to do that, why don't we go around and talk about what your favorite filament is right now, because I always like to talk about that, what you're currently using or what your favorite filament is right at the moment. And then also what is the 3D print that you're currently working on, or one that you're planning on printing, because that's always fun to do. So we'll kick it off with Jesse this time.
Oh, now that I want to go grab a prop, I still like I've been burning through a lot of Hatchbox and 3D Solutech stuff. Just recently, actually, I cleaned up my printer room, and I threw out like 4 rolls of 3-year-old ABS because I don't like to print ABS, and also a 3-year-old thing of ABS that hasn't been sitting in a humidor or something like that isn't gonna do too well. I guess the opposite of a humidor.
You want a dehumidor.
But
I just see the roll of film and blown up like a sponge.
Yeah, right.
And I've heard you can bake out some of the moisture after, but I don't like to use ABS anymore.
It sounds like a hassle for something you're not going to use.
My latest printing that I have been working on is I bought some files there's a game called Gaslands. You'll know if you'll be able to see this. You can kind of see it. But basically you use like Hot Wheels, and it's, if you've ever heard of the game X-Wing Miniatures, ships that fly around, and there's movement templates and stuff like that. So I bought some files. This is like X-Wing, where you mod out a Hot Wheels car and you have movement templates and certain rules, and you drive around blowing each other up. And so I'll probably get a resin printer eventually to print these in better detail, but just like armor and weapons and stuff. And I'm gonna be doing some more of that, and I'll probably post a picture of a painted car when I'm done.
And what layer height are you printing those at? That, I mean, they're pretty
these
fine
I
details.
did at 100 on my Prusa, and they turned out okay. They'd be better on resin just because of like undercuts and stuff. Yeah, you can't really see that. It doesn't zoom in far enough, but most of it looks good. The files were good. There's some free ones on Thingiverse, but they're not as good as these ones. So eventually I'll get that resin printer, but until then, I'll probably make a couple cars this way.
Very cool. Very cool. How about you, Nick?
So other than printing parts, I've got some stuff queued up to print. So for the 301, I'm doing a few things for the robotics team. So I've been printing, like I said, these, I was mentioning, I don't know if I was on air or not, but these little flames that are hollow inside, so they can put, they're painting them kind of red, yellow, and orange. And then they're actually going to put lights inside of it to kind of light up. And so every year they make these awards to give out to the other teams. So for various things, hey, we like your media stuff, or hey, your robot's great, or whatever, or hey, you're just cool, and so they give out these awards. So for each competition, they have like 3 of them. So they're going to make up these things. So it'll be like a wood base. They're going to do some like wood burning stuff in there. But then, I was helping them by printing this little flame piece they can put on top, so they can, and then it'll kind of glow essentially. So it'll look kind of like it's lit up. So that's one thing I've been doing for them. And then I'm sure there'll be some other stuff we come up with for the robot specifically, like every now and then. Like last year we did some, we were using like Raspberry Pi cameras. So we printed some cases for that, little things like that. So that'll probably be next couple of weeks. I'll probably print some of that along with, parts for the printer.
That is very cool.
A bunch of benchies.
Have you tried that? You said you bought that carbon fiber PLA. Have you printed anything
not yet.
with that yet?
I've been waiting to dial in. Once I get my 301 dialed in, then I'm going to use it. So I don't want to waste any because it was like, what was it? 25, 26. It was a decent deal, but it was still pretty, it's kind of pricey. So I don't want to like burn through, 100
well, yeah, but I'd like
grams of it.
Something. I mean, I don't have a carbon fiber benchy, and that would be kind of cool, so.
I actually need to buy another nozzle too, now that I think about it, because if I print that stuff through the brass nozzle and the 301 I have right now, it'll be wasted in 5 seconds. So I've got the steel nozzle on my ender, so I might just end up printing it on there. But the plan is to print all my parts with that once I'm done prototyping.
Very cool.
I'm excited to do that, and then I've got glow in the dark stuff that I need to use more, so that would be really cool. So I want to do some stuff like you did. You did like some UV lights and stuff with glow in the dark, and I want to.
Yeah. So fun fact: make sure you either vacuum seal that stuff back up or keep it a dry box. My glow in the dark that I got started getting really, really brittle. Even keeping it in temperature controlled dry box, it's still getting really brittle.
Okay. Mine was brittle when I got it.
Normal. I mean, a lot of PLA is like that. Some will last the time before printing, and other ones become very brittle. Just depends on how they formulate it.
Yep.
All right, Billy. So what favorite? I gave you a minute because I knew you probably had about 20 filaments that you love using, but. So favorite filament, and what kind of prints are you working on right now?
Favorite filament is probably still this Protopasta Cupid's Crush, which is looking a little strange on the camera. It's a cooler pink in real life. It's like a dull hot pink, I suppose, and it's glittery. It's really cute. And I paid $80 for 500 grams of it.
Oh my god!
I live in Australia where everything costs a fortune. So that's part of the reason I have such cheap printers. I think I'd prefer to support the community on my next ones. But yeah, it's even my CR10 cost me like $1,600 to get. So like it's everything here is really expensive. But yeah, really, really beautiful filament. And I'm currently making a Polly Pocket Raspberry Pi Cyberdeck. Cyberdecks are like really weird silly computer interfaces that are sort of retro futuristic usually. And there's a little Discord group that I help moderate for that. And yeah, I've been building a Raspberry Pi powered Polly Pocket inspired cyber deck,
That is
which will
very
have,
cool.
yeah, it's really silly. It'll have like a monocle display that's like a love heart. So that'll be how you see stuff. And then the keyboard like has a little love heart shaped keyboard, and the little keycaps are love hearts, which I printed on my resin machine. And yeah, it's just gonna be so sickly sweet that people will vomit when they see it. So I'm excited. It's gonna be so stupid, but great.
That's okay. Some of the craziest stuff like that ends up being the most fun. So nothing wrong with that at all.
It's just really fun. I wanted to make it kind of like, because I'm starting to learn like Arduino and like a little bit more of the robotics side, because it's really cool and you can do so much with it. But I'm really starting, like I made a blinking light, woo. But I thought it'd be really cool to have like a portable little version. So like it'll be like a bigger version of this, and the top half here will have like a little drawers with like little components in them, and then the bottom half will have the Raspberry Pi, and the keyboard will be able to come out so you can still type. And then the Raspberry Pi, you can attach leads and attach little motors and stuff, so it'll like be like a portable hacker PC, I guess, or a little Pi. That's the
That's
vague
very
idea.
cool.
Yeah, it should be fun. It should be silly fun.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so my turn. So I'm doing nothing exciting in the way of filament. Overture Black PLA is really. I just ordered yet another roll. I think that is like the 5th or 6th roll of that Black PLA. It is dirt cheap, but it works so well for printing parts, and that is what I've been largely printing with the 301. Has just been more and more parts. So I know we didn't really talk about it. We talk about it from time to time. But Billy, I'm sure you probably don't know because you probably didn't follow the channel before. But so the X301, I did a 3D printer series called the C201, and it's very much like an AM8, if you will. Very similar type of 3D printer, but it walks somebody through step by step, not knowing anything about how to build a 3D printer. If you get the parts list, you buy the parts and you walk through it, you can get a 3D printer at the end, and one that works fairly well, and you don't really need anything special but the few 3D printed parts that are part of it. So lots of people that follow the channel have been either building that printer or have used those videos to learn about how the ins and outs of the 3D printer work. Well, that was kind of like the first printer video series that I did. But at the same time that I was working on that video series, Nick and I have been prototyping a Core XY build of our own design. So we've been working on that for, gosh, it's almost coming up on a year now. I feel like it's we're only 3 or 4 months away from a year that we've been working on this prototype for this printer. So we talk about 301. We are on actually the 3rd prototype revision of it now, which I think is going to be the last one. And then we're going to do a Core XY 3D printer build series the same way we did the Cartesian printer. So if you don't really know a lot about 3D printing but want to build your own Core XY printer, you'll be able to follow this series. And at the end, it's an open source 3D printer with a full parts list that you can go buy. And the design's a little bit different than some of the Core XYs that you see, like the Hypercube. We've got a very open front design on it, so that way it's not like a printer base in a cube. It's very open, so it's kind of a different design. So that's what I've been working on, along with the other videos for the channel and that. So it's a long build, but I think we're almost there, buddy.
Yeah, a lot of vacations and stuff and family stuff that I've been going through, so I haven't been able to focus on it as much as I want. But like I said, I'm going to be doing some work on it now. So working on improving my carriage design and getting some of the other parts just tweaked and finalized. So it's a process. You always, my biggest problem is I'm never happy with what I've done because I can always see a slight improvement I could make. So if I ever get to the point where this thing is like I can't find any way to make it better, then I don't know. Either I've gone crazy or maybe we actually made something decent. I don't know.
It's a good printer. The prints come off absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing. Like when mine's working, like it's really good. Like I said, I've got some tweaking things to do. I've got my carriage is like kind of loose, so like when it's printing, if it catches a little bit of the print, it'll like shift. So I've got something there where it's not tight. So I got to kind of design it a little better.
Yep. So I don't know how well this will translate on here, but on here. So that, and I'm catching that light on purpose, but that is pretty smooth. That little ripple there looks so much worse on the camera than it actually is.
Yeah,
but
I noticed like depending on the light.
Yeah,
definitely.
it's basically as smooth as it gets. It is by far the best prints that I've ever gotten off a printer has been off of that one. Even having the ender tuned and having the C201 tuned, this thing just goes back to the same spot every single time. It is just perfect. So very happy with it. So we've got to get it wrapped up because we want everybody else to be able to build this printer, and it shouldn't be all that much to build. So
yeah, and it's funny part is like the mechanicals aren't even that the expensive part. It ends up being like the electrical and the hot ends and stuff. That ends up being kind of where the money ends up. Funny enough. So I mean, I think the extrusion, we got, it was pretty cheap. Like as far as the frame itself is quite cheap, and then yeah, it's all the other little bits, the separate motors and the rails and the electronics is where all the money is.
Yep. All right. Well, we are coming up on the top of our hour, so I just kind of want to go through one more time with the chat. Anybody got any questions for Billy or Nick or Jesse or myself? Looks like Daniel's. There are 2 filament manufacturers near I live. One sells 10 kilograms of PLA for 105. That sounds like a pretty decent deal. Mm-hmm. And then the other for PETG around $15, which is nice. Yeah, $25 for a roll of PLA. That is very expensive.
Yeah, and I know like you've got some of these places like the Proto Pastas and things like that, and they do make like really neat filaments, and I think that's she was talking about paying a lot for that filament, but it is a very unique filament. Like you're not just buying black or red or blue. It's got all these extra additives where they have to kind of craft these so they still print. You can throw whatever crap you want in the filament, but it has to be able to print well, and that's what they take a lot of time to do.
It doesn't cost that. It's nowhere near that. It's nowhere near that. Filament.
And I can't remember. Are they a US based company? I can't remember.
Yeah, they're US. They're in.
Okay.
They're in that state that's
California.
No, they're in the same state as Seattle. Which
okay. It's Washington.
Yeah.
I think they're in. It's not. Is it Vancouver or it starts with V? Is it Vancouver in Washington State?
Vancouver's in Canada.
It's above it.
It's the other one.
Joel went there, right? And he lives in California.
Yeah. No, it's.
But they're north.
3 hours from Seattle.
Yeah.
It starts with V. Vermont.
No, that's
okay.
on the east.
No.
Let's see.
Sure, it's V.
Oh, somebody's saying
Vancouver. So it is Vancouver, but it's Washington.
Washington, Vancouver.
So clearly, when I think Vancouver, I think Canada.
I got it right. Oh my god.
You're good. Yeah, I didn't know there was a Vancouver in Washington.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll get to see them because I'm actually staying in Seattle after Murph, and they invited me to come see their lab, and that would just be like amazing because so cool. I'd love to see filament being made. So hopefully I'll be able to make it. Take a day trip.
That is kind of like the secret sauce, right? I mean, you see like little pictures of these guys making filament in these factories, but I would love to see like a full speed filament machine doing its thing. That would be kind of cool to watch.
Yes. Yes, 100 times yes. I really want to make filament one day. Like that would be so cool. I really want iridescent filament. Like,
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that. I have like thought about it repeatedly on recycling filament and going through it. There's, if you want to do it for the sake of like doing it to say I recycled filament, that's awesome. But there's no way that I could find to make it cost effective to recycle filament.
No, I think at some point it might become more of a service thing where you can just package it up and ship it to someone, and they'll, here. Yeah. Oh, that's a little
this
box.
is a box of all my waste filament I've ever had in this little box, sorted by color, saved for the day that I get a filament recycler.
Well, how is that box so small?
Huh?
How is that box so small?
I really, really don't like printing the same thing twice. So I put a lot of time into the design before I print things. So generally things work first go. I'm pretty lucky with that. And I did chop up a lot of bits, like they're sort of chopped up in there. But yeah.
I would go through a box like that about every week. So I mean,
I print small things. I mean, you saw most of my things. They're usually little. So
while you're biking to work, Rob is taking a cruise ship.
Yeah.
Flying there.
I literally do take the all messed up on the part. Nope. Oh, just getting another one.
Yeah. What I find too is like half my bin of like or old parts is like stuff I needed at the time, but then I replaced with another part or something like that. So it's like, well, I don't need this anymore. It gets chucked in the bin with all the rest of the the mistakes and failures. So
I call it the island of misfit prints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a big tub.
They're not fails. They're just they're just where we learned something.
Indeed.
I have an epic fail 2 years ago at Murph. They had like who had the worst print fail, and they had like a contest. So hold on to it and bring it.
Oh, okay. My box.
Yeah. So that Cubits Crush metallic for half a gram in USD, it's $30. So it's
there you go.
Quite cheaper.
Much cheaper. I'm gonna stock up when I'm over there. I'm seriously bringing a second.
Of course, that's not with the shipping though. So I'm not sure what they charge for that.
Very cool. All right. Well, it looks like we are at the end of our show. I want to thank all of our guests today. Look, see, 2 hours already went by. You're like, wow, that was really, really fast. So all of our guests, please hang on. But I want to let everybody know, again, we do this every 2 weeks. So next show will be in 2 weeks. And then make sure if you're not subscribed, click that subscribe button on YouTube or follow me on Twitter. And then the other thing I wanted to say is next week I will be at the Elkhorn, Wisconsin Maker Fair. So if you want to say hi and stop by, we can talk 3D printers or other maker stuff. And other than that, just want to again thank Billy and Nick and Jesse all for hanging out on the show today. And that's going to be it for today. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you all next time.